The last stand, the morning sun cast long shadows across the mining platforms of New Kepler colony as Dr. Sarah Chen carefully brushed dirt from an artifact that had waited 10,000 years to see light again. The fragment of crystalline metal hummed softly in her hands, its surface covered in symbols that no living being could read. Sarah had spent 3 years studying the ruins scattered across this distant world, and each discovery only deepened the mystery of the ancient civilization that once called this planet home. Another piece of the puzzle. Captain Marcus Torres approached her excavation site, his boots crunching on the mineral-rich soil. The colony commander was a practical man who valued Sarah's work mainly for its potential to uncover valuable resources. But even he seemed fascinated by the strange technology they kept finding. "More than that," Sarah replied, holding up the artifact. "This is part of a larger network. The energy readings are off the charts, and the symbols match the ones we found at the main temple site. I think the ancients built some kind of planetary defense system." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Defense against what?" Before Sarah could answer, alarms began wailing across the colony. Red warning lights flashed as emergency broadcasts crackled through their communicators. "All personnel to emergency stations. Unknown vessels approaching. This is not a drill." Sarah and Marcus rushed to the command center where worried faces stared at screens showing massive ships descending through the atmosphere. The vessels were unlike anything in human records, with twisted spires and organic curves that seemed to writhe as they moved. Dark energy pulsed along their hulls like flowing blood. 14 ships, Captain," reported Lieutenant Kim Park from the communications station. "They're not responding to our hails." "Wait, incoming transmission." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a creature that made several colonists step back in fear. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall with a chitinous exoskeleton that gleamed like black metal. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in razor-sharp claws. Its head was triangular with compound eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. When it spoke, its mandibles clicked together rhythmically. "Humans of this world," the creature said, its voice translated by their systems with mechanical precision. "I am War Prime Zethkar of the Zak Empire. You have trespassed on Imperial territory and harvested resources that belong to the Empire. Your species has been evaluated and found inferior. You will surrender immediately or face extinction." Marcus stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. "This is Captain Marcus Torres of New Kepler Colony. We claim this world under the Colonial Settlement Act of 2387. We've established legal mining rights and will not the transmission cut off." Moments later, energy beams began raining down from the alien ships. The colony's shields flared bright blue before overloading in a shower of sparks. Buildings exploded into flame as the attack continued without mercy. "All civilians to the underground shelters," Marcus ordered. "Military personnel, prepare for ground assault. We're not going down without a fight." Sarah grabbed her research pack and the crystal artifact. As explosions rocked the command center, an idea began forming in her mind. The ancient ruins, the defensive symbols, the energy readings she had been tracking for months. Everything pointed to a system designed to protect this world from invasion. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human defenders used every advantage they could find, but they were vastly outnumbered. The Zrak ground forces moved like a plague of metal locusts, their advanced weapons cutting through human defenses with brutal efficiency. One by one, the colony's sections fell silent. Sarah found herself with the last group of survivors in the main ruins complex, a massive temple carved from black stone that had withstood millennia of weathering. Marcus was wounded, a deep gash across his forehead bleeding steadily. Only 12 colonists remained alive, hiding in chambers that the Zarak seemed reluctant to enter. "The aliens don't like this place," observed Dr. James Walsh, the colony's geologist. "Look at how they stop at the entrance. Something about these ruins makes them nervous." Sarah studied the walls around them, noting how the crystalline veins in the stone pulsed with faint light. Her artifact resonated more strongly here, its hum growing to an audible tone. The symbols on the walls seemed to shift and flow when she wasn't looking directly at them. It's not nervousness, she realized. It's recognition. The Zrak have been here before. They know what this place can do. She moved to the central chamber where a raised platform held what looked like a control interface. The symbols here were brighter, more active. When Sarah placed her artifact into a corresponding slot, the entire room began to glow. "Sarah, what are you doing?" Marcus called out, struggling to stand. "Something that should have been done a long time ago," she replied, placing her hands on the interface. The moment her skin touched the ancient controls, knowledge flooded into her mind. She saw the history of this world, the great civilization that had flourished here, and the terrible war that had driven them to create the ultimate defense. The Zarak Empire had spread across the galaxy like a cancer, consuming worlds and enslaving or destroying every species they encountered. The ancients had been the last to resist them, pouring all their knowledge and power into a planetary weapon, system that could turn a world itself into a fortress. But the system required a living consciousness to guide it, someone willing to merge with the ancient technology and become something more than human. The process was dangerous, potentially fatal. The user would need to enter a state between life and death. Their consciousness expanded to encompass the entire planetary network. "Sarah, step away from that thing," Marcus ordered, but she was already committed. "Tell Earth what happened here," she said, her voice already changing as the ancient systems began to integrate with her neural patterns. "Tell them the Zrak Empire is coming, and humanity needs to be ready." Energy coursed through her body as the temple came alive around them. The walls blazed with light as defensive systems that had slept for 10,000 years began to awaken. Sarah felt her consciousness expanding, touching every sensor and weapon hidden across the planet's surface. Through the planetary network, she saw the Zrak forces outside the temple. War Prime Zethkar stood among his warriors, his compound eyes fixed on the glowing ruins. He spoke rapidly into a communication device, clearly agitated by the sudden activation of the ancient systems. Sarah smiled as she felt her heartbeat slowing, her breathing becoming shallow. To any observer, she would appear to be dying, her life signs fading to nearly nothing. But she was actually entering a hibernation state, her consciousness preserved within the crystalline network while her body rested in a state of suspended animation. The defensive systems reached full power just as the Zrak forces prepared to storm the temple. Suddenly, every piece of ancient technology on the planet activated simultaneously. Energy barriers sprang up around the ruins. Weapon platforms that had been disguised as natural rock formations revealed themselves and began targeting the alien ships. But Sarah held back the full assault. She had learned enough about the Zarak to know that a direct confrontation would only bring more ships, more warriors. Instead, she made it appear as though the activation had been a desperate last resort that had burned out the ancient systems and killed their human operator. The energy barriers flickered and failed. The weapon platforms fired a few ineffective shots before going dark. To the Zrak, It looked like the humans had tried to use technology they didn't understand and had paid the ultimate price. Zethkar entered the temple with his elite guard, their weapons ready. They found Sarah collapsed over the control interface, her body motionless and cold. The other humans cowered in the corners, clearly defeated and broken. **. The female attempted to activate the ancient weapons. One of the Zrak officers reported. She appears to have died in the process. The defensive systems are now inactive. Zethkar examined Sarah's still form with satisfaction. Foolish creatures. They thought they could wield technology beyond their comprehension. Execute the remaining humans and establish mining operations. This world now belongs to the Empire. The surviving colonists were eliminated without ceremony. The Zrak began setting up their extraction equipment, confident that they had eliminated all resistance. They never noticed the faint readings from their sensors, the barely detectable signs that one human heart still beat. One human mind still watched and waited. Sarah Chen lay in her death-like trance. Her consciousness spread across the planet. Through the ancient network, she could see everything the Zrak were doing, learning their weaknesses, studying their technology. They had made a critical error in assuming that humans were as simple as they appeared. The Zrak had encountered the ancient defense system before. On other worlds they had conquered. They knew how to defeat it through overwhelming force and patience, but they had never faced a human operator, someone whose species had survived ice ages and world wars through sheer stubborn determination. As her body rested in its hidden state between life and death, Sarah began to plan. The Zrak thought they had won, but they had only awakened something far more dangerous than any ancient weapon. They had awakened human ingenuity backed by alien technology, and that combination would prove to be their undoing. The war was far from over. It had only just begun. The awakening 6 months passed on the planet, the Zrak, now called Mining Station Kethma. The alien occupiers had transformed the peaceful colony into a sprawling industrial complex, strip mining the rare minerals that made this world valuable to their empire. Massive processing plants belched toxic smoke into the atmosphere, while hover barges carried tons of extracted resources to the orbital shipyards. War Prime Zethkar had been promoted to system commander for his successful conquest. He rarely thought about the humans anymore, except when filing reports about the mining quotas. His attention was focused on the next phase of the expansion into this sector of space, where intelligence suggested there were dozen more worlds, ripe for exploitation. The Zrak had brought in slave laborers from across their empire to work the mines. Tall, grey-skinned beings called Valdari operated the heavy machinery with mechanical precision, their will broken by generations of servitude. Small, quick creatures known as Skrit scurried through the tunnels, their nimble fingers perfect for detailed work in tight spaces. Even some members of the proud warrior race called Thurak had been reduced to manual labor after their world fell too. Zrak expansion. What none of the occupiers noticed was that the ancient temple ruins had been sealed off and declared a dangerous archaeological site. The Zrak had learned to fear the technology of the ancients, so they simply placed warning beacons around the complex and ordered all personnel to stay away. This suited their purposes perfectly, as it meant no one would discover what was happening. Deep within the crystalline chambers, Sarah Chun's body lay exactly where the Zrak had left it, seemingly lifeless on the control platform. But beneath her still form, incredible changes were taking place. The ancient technology had spent months slowly healing her injuries and enhancing her capabilities. Her neural pathways had been expanded and reinforced with crystalline fibers that connected her directly to the planetary network. Her muscles and bones had been strengthened with biometallic compounds that made her faster and more resilient than any normal human. Most importantly, her consciousness had grown to encompass vast amounts of information. She knew the location of every Zrak installation on the planet. She understood their communication protocols, their shift schedules, their weaknesses. She had spent months learning about the enslaved species, studying their cultures and capabilities through the ancient sensors that monitored everything on the world's surface. On a cold morning, when the alien sun cast purple shadows across the mining complex, Sarah's eyes finally opened. She sat up slowly, feeling the power flowing through her enhanced body. The ancient symbols on the walls pulsed in welcome as she rose from the platform. Her reflection in the polished stone showed subtle changes. Her eyes now held flecks of crystalline blue, and thin veins of light ran beneath her skin like living circuits. "Time to get to work," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the temple structure. Sarah's first priority was gathering intelligence about the current situation. Through the planetary sensor network, she watched the daily routines of the occupying force. The Zrak maintained a garrison of 500 warriors, supported by automated defense systems and orbital patrol ships. They had grown complacent over the months, confident that this world posed no threat. That confidence would be their downfall. She began her campaign of resistance carefully, using hit-and-run tactics that the Zrak would dismiss as equipment failures or accidents. A processing plant's power coupling mysteriously overloaded, shutting down operations for 3 days. A shipment of weapons disappeared from a transport convoy. The guards found unconscious with no memory of what had happened. Mine shafts collapsed in sections where the support systems had been subtly sabotaged. After 2 weeks of increasing incidents, System Commander Zethkar called a meeting of his senior officers. Sarah watched through hidden sensors as the Zrak leaders gathered in their command center, their mandibles clicking with agitation. "These are not random failures," declared War Prime Kesik, Zethkar S. second in command. "Someone is deliberately targeting our operations. We may have missed a human survivor." Zethkar's compound eyes reflected the light from the tactical displays. "Impossible. We eliminated all the colonists and confirmed the deaths. Our sensors would detect any human life signs on the planet. Then we are dealing with sabotage from the slave workers," suggested another officer. "Perhaps the Valdari have developed some backbone, or the Thurak are planning another hopeless rebellion." Sarah smiled as she listened to their theories. They were looking in all the wrong directions, never imagining that their enemy was someone they had already written off as dead. She decided it was time to escalate her activities and make contact with potential allies. The Valdari work camp was located in a valley between 2 mining sites. Sarah approached it during the night shift. Change when the guards were rotating and visibility was limited. She moved through the shadows like a ghost, her enhanced abilities allowing her to avoid detection by both organic senses and electronic surveillance. She found the Valdari leader, an elderly female named Kesianara, in a barracks building that stank of despair and industrial chemicals. The tall alien was tending to injured workers, her grey skin marked with scars from years of hard labor. "Do not be afraid," Sarah whispered as she materialized from the darkness. "I am here to help." Keshanara's large eyes widened as she took in Sarah's appearance. "You are human, but the Zrak said your species was extinct on this world." "The Zrak believe many things that are not true," Sarah replied. "Tell me, Do your people want to be free? The Valdari leader's expression shifted from surprise to something like hope. Freedom is a word we have not spoken in many generations. Our children are born into slavery. Our elders die in the mines. What can one human do against the might of the empire? Sarah held up her hand, letting the crystalline veins beneath her skin glow with soft light. I am not just one human anymore. I am the guardian of this world, and I have been planning our liberation for months, but I cannot do it alone. Will you help me? Over the following weeks, Sarah made contact with leaders from all the enslaved species. Each group had been broken in different ways, but they all shared a burning desire for freedom. The Skrit had maintained hidden communication, networks that could carry messages throughout the mining complex. The Thurak still remembered their warrior traditions and could be valuable fighters if properly equipped. Even some of the automated systems could be turned to their cause. As Sarah had learned to interface directly with ancient technology that predated Zorak security protocols, the plan she developed was complex, requiring precise timing and coordination between multiple groups. The goal was not just to drive off the current occupying force, but to cripple the Zarak presence in this system so thoroughly that they would think twice before returning. The liberation began at dawn on the anniversary of the original human colony's founding. Sarah had chosen the date deliberately, as a memorial to the friends who had died and a promise that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Phase 1 involved the Skrit infiltrating the main power distribution center, while Sarah used her connection to the ancient network to overload the orbital defense platforms. The Zorak awakened to find their most powerful weapons offline and their communication systems filled with static. Phase 2 saw the Valdari using their knowledge of industrial systems to trigger carefully planned explosions throughout the mining complex. Months of subtle sabotage had weakened critical structures, and now they collapsed in a cascade of destruction that rendered the extraction operations useless. Phase 3 was where the Thurak proved their worth as warriors. Armed with weapons that Sarah had been stealing and stockpiling for weeks, they launched coordinated attacks on Zorak military installations. Their fierce battle cries echoed across the planet as they fought with the fury of a people who had been enslaved too long. But it was Phase 4 that truly demonstrated the power of human ingenuity enhanced by ancient technology. Sarah had spent months learning to control the planetary defense systems that the original builders had hidden beneath the surface. Now she activated them all at once, turning the entire world into a fortress that could challenge even the Zak fleet. Energy cannons that had been disguised as mountain peaks rose from their concealment and began targeting the orbital facilities. Shield generators created barriers that protected the liberated areas from aerial bombardment. Sensor networks that spanned continents coordinated the defense with machine precision, guided by human intuition. System Commander Zethkar found himself trapped in his command center as explosions rocked the building around him. His compound eyes reflected the chaos on the tactical displays as one after another of his installations went dark. How is this possible? He demanded of his officers. Our intelligence said the ancient systems were destroyed. Warprime Keswick studied the readings with growing alarm. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Someone has learned to control technology that our empire has never fully understood. Through the building's communication system came a voice that made several Zorak warriors step back in recognition and fear. It was the human female they had seen die months ago, but now her voice carried harmonics that resonated with power. System Commander Zethkar. Sarah's voice filled the command center. You made a mistake, when you assumed that humans were weak because they could be killed easily. What you failed to understand is that we are nearly impossible to eliminate. Completely. I am Sarah Chen, guardian of this world, and I am here to offer you a choice. Sethkar activated his personal communicator. You are dead. We confirmed your termination. I was resting, Sarah replied with amusement in her voice. Now I am awake, and I have had months to prepare for this conversation. You can surrender your forces and leave this system immediately, or you can face the full power of the ancient defenses. Choose quickly, my allies are eager to continue the fight. The Zorak commander looked at his tactical displays. Half his forces were already destroyed or cut off. The orbital defenses were offline. The enslaved species had risen in coordinated rebellion across multiple worlds in the system, and somewhere on the planet below, a human who should have been dead was controlling technology that his empire's greatest scientists barely understood. What guarantee do we have that you will let us leave? He asked. You have my word, Sarah replied. But understand this. If the Zorak Empire returns to this system, if you attempt to enslave any of the species here again, I will not be so merciful. This world and its people are under my protection now. Sethkar made his decision. Within hours, the surviving Zorak forces were evacuating the planet. Their ships limped away from the system, carrying news of their defeat back to the Empire's core worlds. As the alien fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Sarah stood on the temple platform where her journey had begun. Around her, the ancient systems hummed with quiet satisfaction. The enslaved species were free to rebuild their cultures and develop their own destinies. The planet was safe under the protection of defenses that had proven their worth against one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. But Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The Zorak Empire would not forget this defeat, and there were other aggressive species in the galaxy who posed threats to peaceful worlds. She had become something more than human, a guardian capable of protecting not just one world, but potentially entire systems. Her story would spread throughout the galaxy, carried by the freed species who had witnessed human determination enhanced by ancient wisdom. Other worlds would learn that humans were not the weak, primitive creatures that aggressive empires assumed them to be. They would discover that underestimating humanity was a mistake that could prove fatal. Sarah Chen had risen from apparent death to end a war and free multiple species from slavery. Her actions would inspire resistance movements across the galaxy and serve as proof that sometimes the greatest victories come from those who are underestimated. The human had been still, but she was never truly at rest. And now the galaxy would learn what that meant. Asterisk.